Before the marble. Before the legions marched. Before the eagle stretched its wings across 3 continents, there was silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence before something ancient awakens. The story of Rome does not begin in glory. It begins in shadow. On the edge of a quiet river, under a sky that held no stars, with 2 crying children and the howl of a she-wolf in the night. No scroll can tell us the truth, only whispers remain. Fragments of myth soaked in centuries of belief, and yet they feel real. Too real to ignore. A jealous king, a divine birth, a river meant to drown prophecy. But fate had other plans. The twins did not die. They floated gently, as if the river itself knew what they were meant to become. And when the basket touched earth, it wasn't royalty that found them. It was a beast, not to devour, but to protect. A she-wolf, ancient and wild, offered them milk from her body and destiny from her breath. Romulus and Remus, 2 names, 1 fate. But Rome would not be built by 2, only 1 would rise. And only after blood had been spilled. This is not a bedtime story. It is a lullaby of war and wonder. Of cities built from nothing, and of dreams large enough to swallow empires. So tonight, as the world quiets around you, let your mind drift back. Let the stones of history speak. Let Rome rise once more. This is the beginning of the eternal city. It began with a basket, drifting silently on a moonlit river. 2 infant boys, wrapped in fate, not cloth. Their cries lost in the wind. Their destiny written not in scrolls, but in stars. The river was supposed to kill them, but instead, it carried them gently, as if the Tiber itself had sworn allegiance to what they would one day become. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, broken by the will of the gods, and touched by Mars, the god of war. Their father was violence. Their birth, a threat. A king feared them, so he ordered their death. But fear can only delay fate, never destroy it. The basket came to rest beneath a wild fig tree, and then silence. No palace, no savior, only the forest. And her, a beast of teeth and hunger. A she-wolf, but she did not kill. She cradled. Her breath warmed them. Her milk fed them. Her body became their kingdom. Imagine that. The founders of Rome suckled not at a queen's breast, but at the belly of a wild thing. They grew under open sky, untamed, unnoticed, alive, until a shepherd, Faustulus, found them. Raised as his own, they became strong, proud, and restless. But Romulus wanted the Palatine Hill, Remus, the Aventine, and when no god answered, one brother did. Romulus lifted a sword and ended the only soul who had ever shared his heartbeat. He did not cry, he built. With a plow he marked a circle in the dirt, sacred ground where no man would cross, not even a brother. That place, those lines, that blood, was the beginning of Rome. A city not built by peace, but by pain. Not born in unity, but in the loneliness of power. And yet, in that silent moment, as Romulus stood over his brother's shadow, something eternal was set in motion. A city would rise, a world would bend to it, but for now, it was only one man, a circle of dirt, and the ghosts that would never leave. After Romulus drew the first circle in the earth, Rome was born, but only just. It was not yet marble or glory, only mud, fire, and fierce hope. What followed was not empire, not yet. It was survival. And for survival, Rome needed kings. 7 men, some real, some half legend, would shape her bones, one reign at a time. First came Romulus, not just the founder, but the builder of law, of army, of boundaries. He filled his empty city with the lost, exiles, runaways, and outlaws. Men with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. but they had no wives. And Romulus, always bold, invited the Sabines to a festival, then stole their daughters, a crime dressed as strategy. War followed. But in the smoke of violence, Rome learned something. She could break hearts and still be forgiven. Then came Numa Pompilius, a man of peace, a whisper in a city of swords. He gave Rome its soul, temples, rituals, the sacred fire. He taught Romans to speak with gods, to fear them, but also to trust them. When the gates of his temple of Janus were closed, Rome knew peace, but they would rarely stay closed. Then marched in Tullus Hostilius, a war king. He burned down Alba Longa, Rome's own blood. His wars fed the city, but also taught it cruelty. He believed in strength, but forgot the gods. And legend says, lightning struck him down. The fourth king, Ancus Marcius, was both builder and warrior. He built Rome's first bridge over the Tiber and founded Ostia, Rome's window to the sea. He expanded the city's grip, not just with sword, but with stone. But then came a stranger, Tarquinius Priscus, an Etruscan, a foreigner. He brought new ideas, new wealth, and the Circus Maximus, Rome's first grand spectacle. He drained swamps with the Cloaca Maxima and laid the ground for the Roman Forum. He made mud into marble. Then came Servius Tullius, a king born from flame. They say his hair caught fire as a boy. In 390 BCE, they came not to conquer, but to destroy. They met the Roman army at the river Allia and shattered it like glass. Rome had never known fear like this. The survivors fled. The gates were abandoned. The Gauls marched in. They didn't occupy. They burned. Temples, homes, scrolls, all of it, ash. The city of law was now a city of ruins. But one hill stood, the Capitoline. And on it, a handful of Romans refused to kneel. One night the Gauls climbed silently in the dark, thinking victory was a whisper away. But in the stillness, a noise broke the sky. Geese, sacred birds of Juno, they cried out, waking the defenders. And in that moment, Rome learned something powerful. Even gods mourn when Rome is in danger. The Gauls eventually accepted ransom, a heavy sack of gold, and they left. But they had planted something deeper than fear. They had given Rome a wound, and wounds don't just heal, they shape. After the sack, Rome changed. They rebuilt fast, stronger walls, better roads, more disciplined legions. They swore, never again. And in the years that followed, they didn't just defend, they expanded. They broke the Latin League. They crushed the Etruscan city of Veii, just 12 miles from Rome, a city older, richer, and taller. But Rome took it, brick by brick. And with every conquest, they didn't just take land, they offered something new. Citizenship, full or partial, rights in return for loyalty. A system built on integration, not destruction. That was Rome's real weapon. Not the sword, but the contract. You could fight them or become one of them. Most chose the second. And so Rome grew, not as a king, but as a network. A living organism stretching its arms across Italy. By the end of the 4th century BCE, Rome controlled more land than any Italian state, not by luck, but by learning. The Gauls had tried to erase them, but Rome had done the opposite. It remembered, and it never forgot what it felt like to burn. That fear became their fuel. The Republic was no longer a fragile experiment. It was becoming a machine, a relentless one. Steel in its spine, stone in its heart, and fire in its eyes. And still, this was only the beginning. By the time Rome controlled all of central Italy, it had become more than a city. It was an idea, an engine, and it was hungry. But south of Rome, the world changed. Greek colonies, rich, advanced, proud, ruled the coastal lands of Magna Graecia, and they did not bow. The greatest among them, Tarentum, felt threatened by Rome's rising shadow. So they called for help, but not from a neighbor, from a legend. Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king, a cousin of Alexander the Great, a people who remembered. And they were just getting started. The Republic had no crown, Gaion, but it had something more dangerous. Gaion, ambition. And the world noticed. To the north, the Etruscans still watched, waiting for Rome to stumble. Gaion to the east, the Sabines. To the south, the Volsi and the Aequia. Old rivals, old grudges. Gaion. Rome fought them all. Gaion and Rome won. But then came a silence. A new kind of enemy. Not soldiers in armor, Gaion, but shadows on horseback. Gaion, the Gauls. Wild, unpredictable, unstoppable. In 390 BCE, Gaion, they came not to conquer, Gaion, but to destroy. They met the Roman army at the river Allia, Gaion, and shattered it like glass, Gaion. Rome had never known fear like this, Gaion 7. The survivors fled, Gaion. The gates were abandoned, Gaion. The Gauls marched in, Gaion. They didn't occupy Gaion, they burned. Temples, homes, scrolls, Gaion, all of it, ash. The city of law, Gaion, was now a city of ruins, Gaion. But one hill stood Gaion, the capital line, Gaion, and on it a handful of Romans refused to kneel. One night the Gauls climbed silently in the dark, Gaion, thinking victory was a whisper away, but in the stillness, Gaion. A noise broke the sky, Gaion. Geese, sacred birds of Juno, Gaion. They cried out, Gaion, waking the defenders, Gaion. And in that moment, Gaion, Rome learned something powerful. Even gods mourn when Rome is in danger. The Gauls eventually accepted ransom, Gaion, a heavy sack of gold, Gaion, and they left Gaion. But they had planted something deeper than fear. They had given Rome a wound. And wounds don't just heal, Gaion. They shape. After the sack, Rome changed. They rebuilt fast. Gaia stronger walls, Gaion. Better roads, Gaion. More disciplined legions. They swore Gaion never again. And in the years that followed, they didn't just defend Gaion. They expanded. They broke the Latin League, Gaion. They crushed the Etruscan city of Veii, Gaion, just 12 miles from Rome. A city older, richer, and taller, but Rome took it, Gaion, brick by brick. And with every conquest, Gaion, they didn't just take land, Gaion. They offered something new. Citizenship, full or partial, Gaion, rights in return for loyalty, Gaion. A system built on integration, Gaion. Not destruction, that was Rome's real weapon, Gaion. Not the sword, Gaion, but the contract. You could fight them, Gaion, or become one of them. Most chose the second, and so Rome grew, Gaion. Not as a king, Gaion, but as a network, Gaion. A living organism, Gaion, stretching its arms across Italy. By the end of the 4th century BCE, Gaion, Rome controlled more land than any Italian state. Not by luck, Gaion, but by learning. The Gauls had tried to erase them, but Rome had done. Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king, a cousin of Alexander the Great, a man with elephants, tactics, and dreams of empire. He crossed the sea and brought with him a new kind of war. At Heraclea and Asculum, he crushed the Roman legions. His elephants trampled everything. Victory was his. But Pyrrhus looked at the battlefield and whispered something eternal. Another such victory, and I am undone. Because Rome did not stay down. For every army lost, another was raised. For every general killed, 100 citizens sharpened their swords. Rome bled, but Rome learned. And when Pyrrhus left for Sicily, Rome conquered the rest. When he returned, he found no allies, no welcome. He left Italy for good, and the Greek cities fell. By 272 BCE, Rome had done the unthinkable. It controlled all of Italy. From the Alps to the sea, no power stood equal. But Rome didn't just rule by fear, it ruled by wisdom. It offered conquered people roads, citizenship, protection. Not chains, Rome's, but contracts. And so it built something greater than an empire, loyalty. Veterans were given land and new colonies. Trade flourished. Latin became the common tongue. The Republic was no longer defending itself. It was preparing for greatness. But just across the water stood its greatest challenge yet. Carthage, a rich, ancient city in North Africa. Carthage founded by Phoenicians, a Rin and ruled by merchants, not kings. Carthage owned Sicily. Rome wanted a foothold. A group of Italian mercenaries, the Mamertines, a Rin, asked Rome for help. A Rin, a Rin, a Rin, a Rin, a Rin, a Rin, a Rin. Carthage also offered, but Rome said yes, and in doing so, Carthage declared war on the sea itself. Because Carthage had a navy that ruled the Mediterranean for centuries, Rome had none. So what did Rome do? It captured a Carthaginian warship, copied it plank by plank, and built a fleet from scratch. But Rome added something new, the Corvus, a boarding bridge, turning sea battles, into land battles, and land battles, that was Rome's arena. The First Punic War raged for over 20 years. Storms sank fleets. Tens of thousands died. But Rome, relentless, obsessive, divine in its discipline, won. In 241 BCE, Carthage surrendered Sicily. Rome had tasted the sea, and it would never give it up. From mud huts on 7 hills to controlling 2 seas, Rin was no longer local. It was global, but with every gain, Carthage, came a new enemy, a new storm. And in the shadows, a boy watched it all, a boy named Hannibal. But that story, Rome said, was still waiting. At the end of the First Punic War, Carthage lost its pride, a boy named Hannibal. When he was just 9, his father, Hamilcar Barca, made him swear an oath, never be a friend to Rome. Hannibal didn't forget, and when he grew up, he didn't come from the sea, he came from the sky, from the Alps. With 90,000 soldiers and 37 war elephants, Hannibal marched through ice, snow, hunger, and death. No one thought it was possible. No one believed he'd make it. But Hannibal believed. And when he reached Italy, he didn't just arrive. He announced himself with blood. At the river Trebia, he crushed the Roman legions. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed them in the fog, and 15,000 Romans vanished. Panic filled the streets of Rome. The Senate trembled. And then came the darkest day in Roman memory, the Battle of Cannae, a masterclass in destruction. Hannibal, with fewer men, encircled an entire Roman army and destroyed it. Over 50,000 Romans died. In a single day, Rome had never suffered like this. And yet, it did not surrender. It didn't even negotiate. Rome raised new armies, drafted teenagers, recalled retired soldiers. Every home gave blood. It changed tactics, refused to face Hannibal directly. Instead, it played a long game. While Hannibal roamed the fields of Italy, Rome attacked Carthage's allies. Fabius Maximus, the delayer, refused glory but saved the Republic. He wore Hannibal down, one cut at a time, and then came Scipio Africanus, young, brilliant, ruthless. He studied Hannibal, learned from him, then sailed to Africa. And in 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, the two titans met face to face. Hannibal, the invader, Scipio, the survivor. And for the first time, Hannibal lost. Carthage surrendered. Rome had won the Second Punic War. But at what cost? The Italian countryside was destroyed. Entire generations were gone. Families erased. But Rome had proven something greater than strength. It could suffer and survive. It could bend and not break. It could rise from ashes and roar louder than ever. That is what made Rome terrifying. Not its soldiers, not its wealth, but its will. And Hannibal, he lived on, wandered lands, wrote memories, and finally took his own life to avoid Roman capture. But his shadow never left Rome. He had come closer to destroying it than anyone ever would again. And Rome never forgot him, because it never forgets anyone who almost wins. After Hannibal's fall, Rome stood alone, unmatched in Italy, feared across the seas. But sometimes, what you conquer outside, you lose inside. The Republic had survived kings, survived Gauls, survived Hannibal. But now, it faced something far more dangerous. itself. Victory had brought riches. Riches brought. In 49 BCE, Caesar stood not as general, but as dictator. He reformed laws, forgave enemies, fed the poor. But one thing scared the Senate more than his power: his popularity. They feared a crown. They feared a king. And so on the Ides of March, March 15, 44 BCE, in the heart of the Senate, Caesar was stabbed 23 times by many called friends, including one he called Brutus. And as he fell, he didn't shout. He simply looked and said, "Et tu, Brute, even you, Brutus?" Rome had killed its brightest star, but in doing so, lit the fire that would burn the Republic to ashes. Civil war returned. Rome split between Caesar's assassins and his heirs. At the center was a boy, his adopted son, Octavian. Alongside Mark Antony, he hunted down the traitors, then turned on Antony himself. Their final clash came at Actium, a naval battle for the soul of Rome. Antony lost, Cleopatra died, and Octavian returned to Rome, not as a consul, not as a general, but as something new. In 27 BCE, he took a title the world would never forget: Augustus, the first emperor. And with that, the Republic died, silently, with no funeral, no cry, only a crown hidden beneath a golden name. Rome, the Republic, was now Rome, the Empire, and the world would never be the same. Rome, the city of wolves and warriors, kings and consuls, republics and emperors, is gone, but not really. Because Rome didn't just build walls, it built ideas. The Republic may have died, but the idea of representation, checks and balances, public duty, survived. Roman law, with its 12 tables, its definitions of justice and order, became the backbone of Western legal systems. Roman roads, once carved across hills and forests, are still buried under modern highways. Roman language, Latin, lives on in French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and in the roots of science, law, and medicine. Roman architecture, arches, domes, aqueducts, still inspire cathedrals and capitals across the world. Even the names, Senate, Forum, Republic, Citizen, all Roman. Rome taught the world what it means to be a state, and what happens when power loses balance. Its rise was built on discipline, its survival on adaptability, and its fall on forgetting the very values that made it great. But even as empires crumbled and centuries passed, Rome lived on, in the minds of kings, the books of scholars, and the dreams of revolutionaries. Napoleon, Thomas Jefferson, the founding fathers of America, they all looked back, not to conquer Rome, but to learn from it. Because Rome was never just a city, it was a mirror, showing the world how high we can rise,